Hello and welcome. We're in Goa currently, and I am delighted to be joined in person by the world's foremost foreign affairs guru, Fareed Zakaria. Thank you very much, Mr. Zakaria. It's always so nice to see you in person and talk to you.
It's a great pleasure to be with you, Rahul.
The biggest question in the world right now is what is likely to happen over the next 4 years with Donald Trump in the helm as the 47th President of the United States. Of the clues that Trump has given since his historic victory, what do you make of what our viewers should expect from a second Trump presidency?
It's hard to tell because Trump really, more than any president I can remember, really perhaps more than any world leader, it's a personality more than a program. It's his personality that determines everything. Does he feel like he likes another foreign leader? Does he feel like there's a deal here where he's going to look good? It's all about that. So with that caveat, because you really have to say that, would anyone have guessed that in the first Trump term, Donald Trump, the great hardline Republican hawk, would fall in love with Kim Jong-un, the dictator of North Korea? Why did he do that? I think somebody convinced him that if he got a deal with the North Koreans, he would win the Nobel Peace Prize. So it became really more about him than about a realistic appraisal of what the prospects for a deal were. I think what we can say is this: Trump in the first term came to office by his own admission, and certainly the admission of his closest lieutenants. He didn't expect to win. So he comes into office and he essentially takes on the Republican establishment. If you remember, his first chief of staff was Reince Priebus, the head of the Republican National Committee. He takes on the former CEO of Exxon as his Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, because he thought he knew the world, things like that. That is not what Trump 2 is going to be. Trump has realized that all those people were not ultimately loyal to him. He appointed a lot of generals in the first Trump term. And I think he discovered that those generals, when he would order them to do something, if they believed it was not in the Constitution, not legal, or maybe even violated certain ethical codes, they wouldn't do it. So it seems to me that the lesson he has taken from the first Trump administration is you need people who are absolutely loyal to you and whose loyalty would not make them question your directives, even if they are ethical concerns they have or constitutional concerns. So at one level, it's a little worrying, but it tells you who you're getting. This is going to be a much more full-throated Trumpian group. And what do we know about the appointments he's made? Marco Rubio is a very talented politician. The National Security Advisor, again, a serious guy who has foreign policy experience. They're both very hawkish on China. And I think that in general, what you'd have to guess from what you're seeing is that there will be a pretty tough policy on China. And what's also happened is there's been a broad shift over the last 10 years in the United States in the kind of strategic elite's perception of China. Because in a classic, pattern in international relations where each side, does one thing which causes the other, they have watched Chinese maneuvers and felt that the Chinese are essentially building a military that is designed to defeat the American Navy in Taiwan, designed to really replace the United States as the leading power in the Indo-Pacific. So I think you're going to see a much more hawkish policy on China. Trump has always said he loves Modi, so I think there will be a continuation of the policy toward India. The truth is, while we have these very colorful changes in America, and if you think about it, you went from Clinton to Bush to Obama to Trump to Biden. U.S. policy toward India for the last 25 years has been remarkably consistent and upward moving. And so I think what you're likely to see with India is the continuation of that upward moving trajectory, closer and closer cooperation, greater and greater determination to create an Asia where you have less dependence on China and greater interdependence with India.
There is a conspiracy theory which does the round in society in general, which says that there is a liberal media bias against the likes of Donald Trump. And you may have seen this one video which Elon Musk shared. You feature very briefly in it where you're saying there's no way Trump can win. And when Trump's vote gets underestimated a third time over, they say, you know, I'm telling you, all these Zakaria type liberals, they knew that Trump was winning, and yet they made it seem to their audiences that he isn't, because there is a massive liberal media bias against Trump. And that feeling gets reinforced because in the end, from the outside, even though the numbers suggest it was a close election, but from the outside it seems Trump won easy. So how do you, as a practitioner and as a pundit, respond to this? Because they're saying, hum to bata hi rahe the, ye sab biased hain inke khilaf.
So in this election, I never argued that Kamala would win. It's ironic they're using a clip from 8 years ago. But the truth is this. This election, I always said, was too close to call. Privately, honestly, I did think Trump would win. I thought very narrowly. Let's look at the final results. And it appears that Trump has won by about 1.5% of the popular vote, which is less than Biden won by, less than Obama won by, less even than George W. Bush won by in 2004. So it's not an overwhelming victory. It's a solid victory, but it's one of the smaller victories. If you tally it on American presidential elections, I think it comes something like 50 out of 60. I think that 2016, I definitely thought Trump would not win, partly because, you know, if you looked at the polls, Hillary Clinton was leading by 7, 8 points. The really interesting question is not that there's a liberal media bias about this. That's silly. It's that there is a persistent problem in polling which is not picking up Trump voters. And there are 2 or 3 reasons why this seems to happen. One is that Trump has upended the political coalitions. He appeals to some people who are new. He turns off some people who used to be reliably Republican. You know, the party has changed so much. It used to be the party of the rich and the upper middle class. It's now the party of the poor and the working class. So in that midst of that, when you're polling and you make these adjustments, because obviously you're polling a sample and then you're trying to adjust, you know, I have too few blacks, I have too many women, and you adjust. In that adjustment, are you missing these shifts that are taking place? The second is that Trump voters seem to be shy. They use that phrase, meaning they are less willing to talk to pollsters. They are less willing to tell pollsters whom they're going to vote for. And in that context, you're getting some underrepresentation. There's a very interesting analysis that was done by somebody, a Republican pollster, who decided to ask the question differently. He said, not whom are you going to vote for? Who do you think your neighbors are voting for? And he got a much higher response for Trump than... So in other words, people are saying, I don't want to admit to you that I'm voting for Trump, but all my neighbors are voting for Trump. So maybe there needs to be more clever calculation around this. But I would say that to me, the lesson actually, which is a very healthy lesson, is that polling is a very imperfect science. I mean, when I was getting my PhD in social science, we had to do a lot of this kind of statistical analysis. And I was always conscious of, because what assumptions you make massively affects the, are you assuming that you need to adjust for non-college educated black men? Because it turns out that that's a very significant group who trended a little bit toward Trump. Well, if you didn't make that adjustment, you know, because you can adjust for 1,000 categories. The ones you choose are the ones that determine. So it's a little bit more of a kind of technical problem. Now, I don't want to pretend, by the way, the media is generally liberal. That's true. Just as academia is generally liberal. Just as, by the way, consulting firms are generally liberal. The big divide in America right now is college education. If you have the single strongest predictor of who you voted for in this last 3 elections has been, do you have a college degree or do you not? If you have a college degree, you're much more likely to have voted for Kamala Harris. If you don't have a college degree, you're much more likely to have voted for Donald Trump. So of course, the professions that are, you know, that have lots of people with college degrees are going to skew left.